Many people here know that there are political prisoners in the United States. Those including the 5 Cuban compañeros, the 3 Puerto Rican prisoners, Oscar and the 2 Machetero brothers who've been in, one for 2 years and the other for over a year, the recently captured warriors from the independence movement in Puerto Rico. But often people are surprised when we say in these activities, there are over 200 political prisoners in the United States. Over 200 political prisoners in the United States. And sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around that. But let me just give you a small, short idea. About 5 years ago, Catholic nuns went into a missile silo in Colorado and poured blood over the missiles in protest to the wars that are going on in the Middle East. They're doing time, 7 years as a matter of fact. We have folks who are active in the animal rights movement. We have folks who've been arrested as part of doing civil disobedience against the U.S. corporations. We have political prisoners from all types of communities in the United States. And if you add to that, that the great majority of incarcerated people in the prison system in the United States are people of color, then you begin to understand the enormity of the prison industrial complex and the enormity and responsibility that we have around our political prisoners. Just yesterday morning at 2 a.m., a young Dominican brother was shot and killed by the police because his family's grocery store was being held up, and as he was running out to escape the gunman, the NYPD gunned him down. And as we're gathered here today, his family and some of our organization members who aren't here are in a picket that started at 5 o'clock. So we urge you to keep on top of that. Romali Martin, more recent, Romali Graham, I'm sorry. Davon Martin. You know, they are killing our folks in the streets, and we have a responsibility, but they're also murdering them on the installment plan behind the walls. We have African American political prisoners who've been in solitary for 30 and 40 years. Yes, solitary confinement. For 30 or 40 years, never being put in the general population. Could you imagine what that does to a human being? And now I'd like to introduce the Casi Bahagua Taino Cultural Society. Thank you for being with us today, Robert.
If you learn a little bit more about the Kawashkar people, it's also a very tragic story. But I'm very honored to see Carlos here among us, a real fighter. We are here also to say happy birthday to Leonard. So in that way, in our people's way, we also like to share songs and music to help bring people up, to lift their spirits, because in the old days, that's how people really were together, when they were in areto, or these gatherings where we could bring out music and instruments. And those aretos, those songs and stories, and that time together was our time for our people to renew bonds and make alliances. And those alliances were extended right from the beginning of contact with Europeans to also to the first Africans who were enslaved. And that's why many of our peoples got together in resistance to the oppressions that they were facing 500 years ago. 519, maybe even more in certain places, right? But for us in Boriquén, 519 years of resistance. In this story, there's a group of iguanas. Iguanas is an animal that we have in the tropical islands, the Taino people, original people, First Nations from the Caribbean island region. Islands today called, what we call, say, Boriquén. People say Puerto Rico. also Quisqueya, Haiti, the Dominican Republic and Haiti, Cuba, Cubanacan, and Jamaica, which we know as Jamaica. Those are the main Taino homelands along with the Bahamas. And even some of our people were settled in the southern tip of Florida as well, living near the Calusa people. So even the people that they say are immigrants are really the descendants of the original peoples who were there in Florida. So we have to remember that as well. Thank you, relatives. And we say that really with all sincerity, thank you, relatives. We believe that we're all related, and our peoples always did. And that's why they were always so welcoming from the very beginning, even to the culture and the people, because they were different, because they had different views of spirituality or what we call religion, and it didn't jive with their worldview. So we're very fortunate that we still have aspects and parts of our culture still with us today, and I'm also very proud to see so many young people coming back and accessing that culture and promoting that culture again and being proud of who they were and are, right? Because I remember a time, at least even up to my grandmother's time, when just to say somebody was Indio, remember the Tainos were the first people encountered in this hemisphere, so we were the first people to be called Indians, right? So to say that somebody was Indio was not looked at as something to be proud of. It was really looked at as something to be looked down upon. I'm sure some of you remember the old TV show, The Lone Ranger and Tonto. Well, there was a reason why he was called Tonto, because in Spanish, tonto means like stupid, right? So all those years, come on, Tonto, come on, tonto, that's what the Lone Ranger was calling him. And it was just this ongoing oppression right there on national television, right? But everybody's like, hey, the Lone Ranger, hey, Kimosabi. But they didn't realize actually what was happening and what he was calling the native every week, right? So this is something that we live with, that we have to understand, and to see how deep it's ingrained within the system. So with that in mind, we just wanted to show you some of the instruments. Maybe you're not used to seeing some of these things. I'm going to start out with this instrument right here that we opened up with. A very important instrument. We call this in our language guamo. Sometimes you'll hear the word fotuto, and that comes from the mix of the Portuguese coming into the islands. But in the Taino language, this would be called guamo. And this is like the first cell phone, right? Wireless communication. And this is the way our people would communicate across valleys and let people know. And again, it's a conch shell. If you've ever been to the islands and had carrucho or lambi, this is what they're talking about 3 pounds of meat in one of these guys. Unfortunately, they're not getting this big anymore because of the overfishing and also climate change. Right? We have to understand that all these things are interrelated. Political prisoners, oppression of people of color, climate change, the war on the environment, all of this is mixed. And that's why we're not finding these things, as you have to go farther and farther out. So again, you cut the tip and you have yourself your trumpet. So you could imagine hundreds of Tainos gathered on the beach and doing areto with these. It's quite a moving experience. This instrument, anybody have an idea what the name of it? Maraca, very good. You get the prize. If we had one, we'd give it to you, but you get it. Maraca, very good. A Taino word. A lot of people don't realize, because the first encounters happened in the Caribbean, many words from the Taino language were incorporated into English and to Spanish. So when we use, during the summertime, you know, people are eating a lot, they're using a cookout, they're using the barbacoa, from our Taino word barbacoa, and you say in English barbecue. After you eat too much, you may be tired and you want to go to sleep in a hamaca, right? Hamaca, hammock, another Taino word incorporated. And there's many, many more. That hammock also, that piece of Taino ingenuity, engineering, has all made it all the way to the moon, because in one of the first Apollo missions, they took a hamaca with them. So you could see how far the Taino mind has gone, right? So that's another instrument. I used a flute in the first song. We say in our language bajio. And this instrument right here, many people have drums, the heartbeats of the nations. This particular drum we call mayo huacan. Mayo huacan. In some communities they'll say maguey, but we call it mayo huacan. You see it's a log there, hollowed out, with 2 notes on it. Now you hear those 2 notes. We have a certain, where we say the origins of the drum was, or how the people learned to make the drum, was from a little frog that we have on the island. Right, so you have the 2 notes, and you even see, if we're going to hold it up once more, right? If you see the lines, there's, this way, there's like 4 lines, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom, also like the frog, right? So just like that. So that's how we get reminded of all those things. And here we go. So these guys go together right there. The Mayo Akan. Well, we know we have, did I bring that weed in here? We're going to do one more piece for you, to share one more song. I think I just have an instrument over here. This one, in the Taino language, we say guaje. But as it progressed into the campesino communities and into the mixture, you'll hear this instrument also called guiro, guicharo. But it's another indigenous instrument. There's this forms of guidos all over the Americas. There's some, like if you go to Cuba, you'll see the the little slits here are very thick, and they'll use that with one stick. In Boriken, we like to use them with a little more carved out there. Sometimes you'll see people with just a long stick and bumps on it, and they'll just be right? But there's another part of our indigenous heritage. We're going to use this instrument in this next piece. We call Areto Kare, or the song for the Kare, talking about climate change and the abuse on the environment. Our people were always very thankful for everything, and they lived their lives that way, saying thank you to everything, thank you to the universe all the time, and try to instill that in our young people at a very early age. And so they would say thank you, just like the way some people say grace today before their meals, or they would say thank you to the animals or to the plants, sometimes giving offerings before they would take plants, giving offerings into the fields. And so this song simply talks about the days, or makes us remember the days when our people used to hunt the kare. And the kare is the great sea turtle. At that time, they would find sea turtles that the Spaniards wrote in their chronicles that could fit at least 5 people in the shells. They were so large. These days, obviously, we don't see a turtle of that size. If you do, it's very rare. But simply in this song, we're calling the sea turtle to us, and then we're thanking it for that sacrifice that it's going to make. So I think it's important, because not only is there a war on our environment, but there's also a real threat, because of this war on our environment, on food security, right? On what we're going to eat, where our food comes from. And these are things we have to think about. So this song is to the kare. Now in the Areto tradition, the tequila, or the song leader, would sing a line, and then the Yucayeke, or the pueblo, the people, would respond. So in this first part, we're going to just do a simple vocable, and then see if you can respond. I think we can do a little better than that. generous right now, very generous relatives. I want to thank you for your patience. And thank you for inviting us to be here. If anyone has any questions throughout the program. But I just want to thank the organizers for having us. And also just take a moment to recognize that we're talking about really, at the end of the day, peace and dignity, right, for our peoples. And there were actually many youth who started at the top of Alaska, some starting at the tip of Tierra del Fuego, running the continent with sacred staffs and praying for the water. And those people are going to meet later this year in November in Guatemala for the final ceremony. So we have runners that are coming from throughout the continent at this time running for peace and dignity for our peoples, praying in community after community. And this is a total grassroots effort. So I wanted to remember those runners and also remember the passing just recently of Gustavo Gutierrez, who was one of the visionaries behind Peace and Dignity that began in 1992. And he just passed at 80 years old. He was going to help some of the runners down in the Grand Canyon. He fell off his horse and he soon died after that. But his spirit is with us, and I just want to remember Gustavo today, remember the runners, and just send good thoughts for them down in Guatemala when they get there, bringing our peoples together once again. Thank you very much. Galichi, Naru, Leron, Vivian, Naru, Rami, Francisina, Rivera. We're part of the Casiva Cultural Society, and we're very happy to be here. Thank you very much.
I'm supposed to touch it, so.
Oh, I don't know what she said, but you can tell me later.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. It makes me, as an African born here in the Americas, so wistful in terms of language. That we had people come up here and be able to speak the language of their ancestors. You know, when we talk about displacement, when we talk about colonization, when we talk about the hearts and the minds of the people, when I think about African people born here and us, many people not knowing who they are, it's because we don't even know we can't even say good morning or thank you or hello or I love you or it's nice to see you. We don't know the words. We don't know the language. We don't know how to say freedom in any language other than the colonizers' language. And we know the colonizers are not interested in our freedom, right? So that is a problem right there. So I'm so honored that we have people here that speak the language of your ancestors and that we have children in the room that hear those languages and the lessons that you gave us about the words. And I mean, it's just amazing. My grandmother said, you know, what you don't know will make another world. And it is so powerfully true. What I learned just in the half an hour of this program is just amazing, right? When I said, my grandmother said you're supposed to learn something new every day. Well, Grandma, I've been learning a few things in the time of this program, so thank you. And when Charles has on that t-shirt, Homeland Security Fighting Terrorism since 1492, you know, that says it all. So from 1492 to 1619 when they kidnapped and brought the first Africans over here, and I was reading a book today about one of the black men, the Africans who were part of Harper's Ferry, the raid on Harper's Ferry, who never, Osborne Anderson is his name, and it never gets talked about. And one of the quotes was that the brethren in the South should not be called slaves. They should be called prisoners of war. Right? And that's what we are, prisoners of war. The difference is some of us have a little bit more movement than Leonard, than Oscar, than Evelino, right? Than the brothers of the Cuban Five, than Sekou Odenga, Abdullah Majid. I mean, we can't even say all the names because as Brother Frankie said, there are 200. Right? And counting, because oppression and repression breeds resistance, and we know that as we resist, there are going to be more freedom fighters and activists who were locked down or attempted to lock down. So I'm really honored to be here and to participate, and I thank you for being here. When the people come out to celebrate and commemorate the people and to say happy birthday to Leonard, so we from inside out, outside in, we let people know that we haven't forgotten them. So thank you so much. So I'm gonna stop talking and let Frankie.
No need to stop. Thank you, Dequi, my sister and comrade in struggle. Before I introduce our next guest, let me say that we have some birthday cards for Leonard, which Ann Lamb is holding right there. So you can start sending and filling them out as we continue with the program. Just pass them around. Wish Leonard a happy birthday. As we continue the program, especially after this contribution that was just made to our culture, I would like to remind some folks and inform other folks that the nation of Puerto Rico was colonized for 500 years under the Spanish Empire, and our Taino native population was exterminated almost, not quite. And that to continue that colonization, the U.S. invaded in 1898, so now it's 500 under the Spanish, 114 under the boot of the U.S. government in Puerto Rico. It is amazing that in 2012, September 8th, we continue to defend and affirm our culture and our independence, our music, our solidarity among each other and with other peoples in struggle. That is indeed amazing. And it's a testament to the power of resistance. I'm honored to introduce and ask to come to speak before you, Compañero Luis Javier Barro, First Secretary of the Permanent Mission of Cuba to the United Nations. Compañero Barro.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you really so much on behalf of my people, on behalf of the Cuban government, on behalf of all my colleagues on the Cuban mission here in New York. At the beginning, I say, what should I have to say about the Cuban Five? I decided, okay, I'm going to make a description of the process or something like that. But being sitting in the rear part, I realized that probably you all brothers that have been fighting for a lot of political prisoners probably know more than me about the Cuban Five. Yes, for sure, about that, about the process. So at the end, I prefer just to read some notes that I wrote before coming to this event, because I think it's really important not to fight for the Cuban fight. We need to fight for all the people, all these political prisoners that you were talking before. And it's clear that when we are talking about people in Latin America, we are talking about people here in US, we are talking about the Cuban Five. We are talking about these political prisoners. We are talking about the most important, about injustice, because all of them have been victims of injustice. And this is the most important. That's why we have to fight. So please, let me just read this note that I wrote, as I said before. The issue of the Cuban Five, unfairly imprisoned in U.S. jail for more than 17 years, almost 14, has been silenced and manipulated by the U.S. media. The Cuban Five are innocent and should return to Cuba without further delay. They were in U.S. to protect the Cuban and the American populations. They were also here just to protect the world. They were here just to protect the Cuban from the terrorist act that that group in South Florida, specifically in Miami, they have planned against Cuba and also perpetrated against Cuba, bombing acts, assassination attempts, a lot of things. So recently, the evidence has surfaced. So the Gerardo Hernandez lawyers have submitted a request to the South District Court in Florida for an oral hearing, and the court to order the government to hand in the documents and other materials they have in his powers. In his powers. That in this case, there are a lot of violations. The United States government have a lot of documents that prove that they are innocent. That's why they don't want to release these documents. Right now, this is the motion that has been presented by the lawyers. Discovery motion. And this is the time we are in this process right now. In this request, if this request succeeds, world public opinion will have the chance to learn about payments made by the U.S. government in Miami to 84 persons linking to the media, 7 TV channels, and 13 radio stations, who during the trial against the Cuban Five unleashed a strong media campaign to influence public opinions against them. It's really important, I think, just to know that a lot of people, not just in Cuba, here in U.S., around the world, have been fighting for the Five. They have been fighting for the Five because they teach us that you, in any struggle, has to be really firm. In any struggle, you have to keep one path. And that is the thing that the Five have been doing, the other political prisoners have been doing in their prisons. So at the end, what I like to say is that we keep in this fight together. We cannot go just alone, just one people, just one person. We have to be together in this fight. So that's why we are here together, not just celebrating just the anniversary of Leonard. We say happy birthday, but also we say we need to fight for all the people. We need to fight for the Cuban Five. We need to fight for the Puerto Rican. We need to fight for Mexican. We need to fight for everybody. And that is the most important. So we need a lot of things to do in advance, but I know that there is one person here that probably know a little more than me about the things that you can do here in New York. So I think at the end you will have more information about activities, about the things that you will be doing in the coming days and the coming months. And that is something really, really, really important. Let me try to find the other notes that I wrote that probably is around here, because I think it's important. Wow, where it was. It's something, a missing paper. It's something similar to the things that they have been doing with the fine, having missing papers. Where is the reality, no? Well, there is no problem. The case of the Cuban Five is important to all people because the serious constitutional violations that took place in their trial, the abuse they were subjected to by federal officials, and the denial of their basic rights as prisoners. If this abuse can be committed against innocent men, then it could happen to anyone. The strengthening of the spirit of the Cuban Five is contagious, and they always have a message of hope and appreciation to all those persons who are fighting for them, like you. So we should never get tired of demanding an end to this too far long injustice, similar to other political prisons in U.S. and around the world. The Cuban people doesn't abandon its brothers, no others. More or less its heroes, because for us, they are heroes, like the others are also heroes for us. They have given up their freedom in exchange for ours. So we need to continue fighting for the Cuban fight and for all the political prisoners in U.S. Thank you so much.
The recent Puerto Rican prisoners that were captured, one last year and one almost 2 years ago. And I always like to share how Avelino was captured and what he was doing whenever I speak to folks, movement and community, because I think it said something, and I think you'll agree. When Avelino Gonzalez Claudio was captured, what was his job? Avelino Gonzalez Claudio was giving computer classes to the federal judges in Puerto Rico in the federal courthouse. They had no idea. He was giving classes at home, he was giving classes in the university, and he was regularly walking in and out of the federal courthouse in Puerto Rico, teaching judges and other court personnel about computers. And in addition to that, he had participated while he was underground in almost every major mobilization. And that's important because people need to understand that these compañeros who've had to go into clandestinity, right, continue the struggle. The same way our compañeros behind the walls continue their struggle and our struggle behind the walls, these compañeros also continue the struggle. But the other lesson is the empire is not all-knowing and all-omnipresent. And ultimately, it's we the people who are going to win. Thank you.
Thank you, Frankie, for sharing that story. I mean, our revolutionaries definitely knew how to go underground because they had to go underground. They were being hunted by COINTELPRO and, law enforcement, federal, state, and local. And, when the police were shooting at revolutionaries, they didn't care that children were around. So people had to go underground. So that is, and I want to thank Ben for saying about armed struggle, because sometimes people think that we have to be nice to our oppressor and be easy and gentle, but self-defense is self-defense, and everyone does something different. People pick up arms, people pick up the pen, people pick up the drum. There's all kinds of ways that we fight this beast, and I think that that's important. My husband, I am married to Sekou Odinga, and he's been in prison for 30 years as a member of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army, who believed in armed self-defense. Sekou was convicted for the liberation of Assata Shakur, who is now living in Cuba with a $5 million reward on her head because of those people in Florida and those people in New Jersey who continue to hunt for her. So she is still not safe, even though, she has lived with the people of Cuba, because we know that when Africa calls, when freedom fighters call, Cuba has always answered. Sekou, like a lot of people, believe in armed self-defense, that we have a right to do that because we have been terrorized since, like you said, prior to 1492. So we appreciate everyone that works to defend the people, whether it's in the courts, like the person that I'm about to introduce now, Michael Kuzma, who grew up on the east side of Buffalo in a Polish working class neighborhood. He currently resides and maintains an office in Kaisertown. Mike has long viewed the law as being a tool to bring about social, political, and economic change. He is a member of the Buffalo chapter of the Leonard Peltier Defense Offense Committee, National Lawyers Guild, New York State Defenders Association, and the Erie County Bar Association. He is also a former member of Leonard Peltier's legal defense team. So can we please welcome Michael Kuzma?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. What I thought I would do is give you a brief update on what's happened with Leonard since last September, or last summer actually, and then talk about a Freedom of Information Act case that I brought earlier this year. Now last summer, Leonard actually got a 20-pound note from a woman in Scotland. It was allowed into the prison. Now Leonard tried, don't ask me why this woman sent this in or why Leonard tried to send this out to someone, but when Leonard sent this 20-pound note out of the prison, it was intercepted by prison officials, and Leonard was put in solitary confinement for 6 months. They took away 100 days of good time that he had accumulated, and he also lost commissary privileges. It was really outrageous. So Sheila Dugan and I and 73 other people on August 6th of last year staged a rally on Highway 15, which passes the prison, and shortly thereafter Leonard was actually transferred on September 12th, his birthday, to Coleman, Florida, a god-awful place about an hour and a half northwest of Orlando. And what did they do? What did the prison officials do? The first thing they did is they put him in a cell with a white supremacist. So in addition to that, on December 23rd of last year, guards entered his cell. They threw his personal belongings about the cell. They spat on his pipe bag. He's had a really hard time in Coleman. I actually wrote a letter about that incident. To this date, I've never gotten a response, but Leonard indicated that since the letter was sent in, his cell hasn't been arbitrarily searched since that time. Now, Sheila Dugan, who's not only a wonderful attorney, she's got a heart of gold, but Sheila, out of her own pocket, paid to get me to Florida, and her cousin was gracious enough to put us up. But we went to visit Leonard on March 30th and 31st, and just to show you how arbitrary the prison officials are, when we went in on the second date, they would not even allow me to bring my handkerchief. I was sent back to my car 5 or 6 times. It was outrageous. I wasn't allowed to bring anything larger than a $5 bill. And if anyone who's ever visited someone in a prison realizes that getting those little treats, even though in Leonard's case he probably shouldn't eat some of those treats, he looks forward to that. So he's not in a good place. If you ever go down there, you drive down the highway, there's all these religious billboards and that. It's god-awful. I know myself, I get nervous once I get south of Ohio. Like Leonard, was wanted for the deaths of the 2 agents, Kohler and Williams. He was already under indictment for shooting Special Agent Curtis Fitzgerald at Wounded Knee in March of 1973. In fact, the FBI actually had a wanted poster for this guy. I've talked to Jamie Graham, who at the time was with the RCMP, he's now Chief of Police in Victoria, and he indicated that when Black Horse was arrested, he had a firearm in his waistband, he had marijuana on his person, and they could have also nailed him for entering the country illegally. The authorities merely charged him with the marijuana violation, which he beat on a technicality. He's still a free man in the United States. I've learned that Curtis Fitzgerald, the agent he shot in March of '73, never fully regained the use of his one hand. Black Horse, his name was actually Frank DeLuca. He was masquerading as an Aboriginal person. His mom was Jewish, his dad was Italian, but he used multiple names. He had no Aboriginal blood whatsoever. So under the Freedom of Information Act, and just briefly, the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, is a federal statute that anybody in this room can use. It, in theory, allows any of us access to records maintained by any federal agency. So beginning in 2004, I set out on a journey to get records regarding Mr. Frank Blackhorse. And I got the royal runaround. I first made a request to the Criminal Division of the Justice Department, and then that request was referred, and this doesn't happen overnight. In theory, you're supposed to get the documents within 20 working days. The reality is it often takes years to get records from any federal agency, whether it be the CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, whoever. Well, anyway, I make this request in '04. I get jerked around. My request goes from the Criminal Division of the Justice Department, and it eventually goes to the FBI. The FBI says, hey, look, we have 927 pages of material, but Mr. Blackhorse is still alive. You'll either have to prove that provide us with a certification of identity, which is a privacy waiver form, or you'd have to provide us with some type of evidence that Mr. Blackhorse has been deceased. Or what we can do is give you public source information in these 927 pages. So I agreed to that. What happens, I send in my payment for the documents, and the FBI quickly returns my payment with no explanation and says we're still withholding the documents. I bring a lawsuit. I was represented by Dare Irwin and Peter Reese in Buffalo. We brought that in February of this year in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of New York. And the government, we filed the complaint. The government had 30 days to answer. The government said I was not entitled to any of these documents. There was no public source material. The FBI had been mistaken. So we actually had a pretty good magistrate judge, McCarthy, who ordered an in-camera inspection. So I was convinced there had to be at least one line that would be public source material. And the judge, after conducting an in-camera inspection, said there was no public source material. So what I've done is I've submitted a new FOIA request for everything relating to Frank Blackhorse, and I've already been denied access. The FBI has written me back and said, well, Mike, if you want to just limit your request to public source material, we'll process that. But we've already, gone that route. So what I'm arguing this time around, and we'll be bringing a new lawsuit, is that the public's right to know outweighs any privacy concerns that this Mr. Blackhorse may have. But I don't know, maybe I'm just getting too paranoid or old or jaded, but I can't believe you could shoot an FBI agent, wound him, then be sought in connection with the deaths of 2 others, and then you're apprehended in Canada and the FBI says that's okay. I would note that after I brought that lawsuit in February of this year, I was attacked quite ferociously by John Trimbach, the son of Joseph Trimbach. He wrote a book called American Indian Mafia, which was a disinformation piece aimed at both the American Indian movement, Leonard Peltier, and the late Judge Nickel. But John Trimbach, whenever anything appears about Leonard Peltier, Frank Blackhorse, or anything I'm involved in, he puts comments, whether it's in the Buffalo News, the St. Paul papers, or what have you. And more recently, and I have some articles on the table here, Ed Woods, he's a retired FBI agent, and he's been funded by the FBI to wage a disinformation campaign against Leonard. It attacked me quite ferociously and tried to imply that I was some loony who believed in JFK conspiracies and such. But we're still using FOIA quite extensively. Judge Gerald Haney, who was one of the appellate judges in Leonard's case, he actually started speaking out on Leonard Peltier's behalf. Guess what happened to Judge Haney? He got a visit by the FBI. They wanted him to change his way of thinking. Judge Haney has since passed away, and since 2010, I've been fighting to get files from the FBI relating to the late Judge Haney, because if we can show that the FBI was meeting with a sitting judge when he was considering Leonard Peltier's appeals, that's the kind of thing that might get the courts to stand up and take notice. In addition, Curtis Fitzgerald, the agent who was shot by Frank Blackhorse, he's passed away. There's no privacy claims. I have a FOIA request in for those records. Let's see what else. Ray Robinson, he was a civil rights worker who actually went to Wounded Knee 2 and was never returned. There was a rumor that Frank Blackhorse actually killed Ray Robinson at Wounded Knee 2. So I've made FOIA requests for records relating to Ray Robinson. So I think the only thing on the right now, other than the FOIA stuff, there is nothing happening in the courts with Leonard Peltier. He's had a lot of turnover at the Defense Committee. He's had attorneys come and go. I've just been pounding away, trying to get documents from the FBI. It hasn't been an easy task. There's still, on the Leonard Peltier and Resmer's files, nearly 11,000 pages that to this very date are being withheld, and the Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit has upheld the FBI's decision to withhold that information. So that's what's happening. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those. We have a pretty active chapter of the Peltier Defense Committee in Buffalo. We've actually printed these postcards that we're urging people to send to the president, urging him to commute Leonard's sentence. Actually, Ann is holding up one, but they put out by a union printer. They only require 45 cents in postage. So there's two schools of thought on that if Obama is not reelected, he might actually commute Leonard's sentence. If you recall David Geffen from DreamWorks, who was a big supporter of Leonard, he actually had talked to President Clinton about commuting Leonard's sentence, and then Clinton was actually going to do it, but then the FBI got to him. But Geffen was one of the first people to come out to support Obama. So we're just hoping with these postcards to keep Leonard's name in the public eye and to remind the president that we haven't forgotten. Also, it's important that people write Leonard just to let him know he hasn't been forgotten. His address is on some of the handouts that I have on the table to my left. And if you go to the whoisleonardpeltier.info website, you can always get Leonard's current address. And okay, well that's great, Ann. But that's pretty much it. What we do in Buffalo, you're probably doing it here. We show movies once a month. We have speakers. We actually have Freedom of Information Act classes, and we've used Leonard's case as an example as to how the people can use the Freedom of Information Act to pry loose documents from the feds. And one other thing, since it's somewhat related, we just sued the FBI in Buffalo. It turns out the FBI was monitoring and I believe infiltrated Occupy Buffalo, which was quite active. So we brought that suit on August 27th. So if you go to buffalonews.com, there's a couple of stories. Phil Fairbanks has been a great reporter. He's done great stuff on Leonard, and he's also covering Occupy. But I'd like to thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to come to the city and see some old friends. But are there any questions? Yes, just.
Thank you for your work, Michael. Much appreciated. I noticed on the endorsements that there are,
like Whoopi Goldberg, for example, has come out from Mia. I was hoping that she would, say something. She's on television every 5 days a week, and I was hoping that she could say something that could spark public interest in this. And why she hasn't, I don't know. You have to say, listen, you're in a position now where you could really, really speak out for justice and freedom and start with Leonard, rather than just, the popular cultural thing that they do on television.
Has one of the models wear something that says Leonard Peltier is innocent. I was recently contacted by her son, who actually, they have an organization called Human Aid, and Pam Anderson is very interested. She's been interested. This goes back to the Bush regime, Bush 2 that is, but Pam Anderson wants to do something. And I just was, communicating with Joe Corey. So there are things, because I think she's still pretty important. I think people would, believe it or not, stand up and take notice. She actually offered to meet Bush too when Bush was considering Leonard's clemency request.
Is it possible to find or to reach out and try and look for someone either in the FBI or
Oh, the FBI will never, based on the documents I've seen, will never.
just
Yeah, okay.
individually, an individual who would be out of conscience and out of the changing environment of this country now, that people are coming forward and saying what the U.S. is and what they do and all the injustices, to find someone who could be what I call a spokesperson.
Now, the only agent I know who came clean, if you will, is Jack Ryan. He was run out of the agency and lost his pension. He refused to investigate Central American activists. There's no Jack Ryans on the horizon in Leonard Peltier's case.
In this kind of context now, of people coming forward and saying, the U.S. has done this, the U.S. has just recently gone by, forgotten when this came out this last week. Well, I'm trying to say in the current environment, it might be more likely someone's what I call a broken conscience who was involved in the frame up and all that they've done. Just, I thought maybe it's an environment that's changing.
The documents I've seen, for example, the late Senator Paul Wellstone, when he started speaking out on Leonard Peltier's behalf, he too got visits from the FBI. When the Minneapolis City Council was considering a resolution urging that Leonard Peltier have a new trial or such, the council chambers were packed with FBI agents and law enforcement trying to quash that resolution, and in fact, they got it quashed. So I don't see law enforcement doing anything noble or honorable like that. But I think I may be running out of time. Yes. But, okay.
They have decided suddenly it's 57 instead of 67. And we'll let it go to the geriatric prison. I don't know if that's still happening. Or not.
We've made multiple requests to have Leonard transferred. We've had no luck. I've written letters. Sheila Dugan has written letters. And I once got a letter from the warden in one of the prisons who said that he's where he belongs, more or less. And I was going right to the top. I wasn't writing some warden. I was writing Harley Lappin, who used to be the BOP director. But I'll be around if you have any questions.